Hello, and welcome to another episode of Balanced Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you today. Ben Azadi went through a personal health transformation in 2008 and ended up losing 80 pounds of pure fat. Ever since, Ben has been on a mission to help 1 billion people live a healthier lifestyle. Ben is the author of 4 best-selling books, Keto Flex, The Perfect Health Booklet, The Intermittent Fasting Cheat Sheet, and The Power of Sleep. Ben has been an incredible go-to source for intermittent fasting and the ketogenic diet. He is known as the health detective because he investigates dysfunction and he educates, not medicates, to bring the body back to normal function. Ben is the founder of Keto Kamp, a global brand bringing awareness to ancient healing strategies, such as the keto diet and fasting. Ben is the host of a top 15 podcast, the Keto Kamp podcast, which has over 1.5 million downloads. He is also the owner of the fast-growing Keto Kamp YouTube channel with over 135,000 subscribers and a TikTok channel with over 220,000 subscribers. Wow. You can find Ben on social media and on his website at www.benazadi.com. Ben Azadi, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Balanced Body Radio.
Casey, I'm grateful to be here. It was a pleasure meeting you at Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, your neck of the woods at Keto Salt Lake. And I just love what you're doing. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You're somebody who I followed for a very long time. You were one of the only people I can think of in the last 2 years that I actually met in person before interacting with them online or something. So that was really fun. And I do have a total confession for you. I have to just tell you this. When I started following you, I kind of thought to myself, okay, this is this guy's shtick. Like, he's really positive. He's really grateful. He's very caring. This is his kind of shtick. But I'll bet you in real life, he's not exactly like this. And I can tell you from meeting you in person, you are every bit the kind gentleman, the enthusiastic, very positive person that you present yourself to be. And I was really happy to know that. And so it was really great to meet you. And it's such an honor to finally have you on our show.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And you're right. You never know. You never know until you meet the person in person, and then you could really see what they're all about. No, it was great. We sat kind of close together, I think, watching Cynthia Thurlow's talk, and you were there the whole weekend. It was an awesome event. And a lot more to come, my friend, a lot more to come.
That's great. Yeah, I can't wait. I should have known just from looking at you. The first time I saw you, you were rocking one of my favorite pairs of shoes, which is Vivo Barefoot. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into minimal shoes?
Yeah, it kind of evolved over the years. I used to own a CrossFit gym for 4.5 years here in Miami, Florida. And I used to suffer with a lot of knee pain and lower body pain, even after my weight loss. And then I started to get into some of the research of barefoot running and barefoot shoes and Paul Check, et cetera. So I started to do the barefoot shoes with like your toes out. And that was at the CrossFit gym doing my deadlifts and doing my workouts like that. And everybody was looking at me like, this dude is pretty weird. Like, what's on your feet, man? And I noticed that my toes, this is not natural for our toes to be closed in like that, right? So I started to research and study that our natural ability is to have those toes spread out. And that's why when we walk like this over and over and over, it could lead to knee pain. It could lead to a misalignment with the human body. So I started to wear those shoes and my toes gradually started to spread out to more of a natural state. And then I used to wear, and I still kind of do, those yoga blocks, those yoga toes that you wear in between your toes.
Mine are right here.
Yeah. And I watch TV with them. I study with them. And then I got into, okay, how do I wear like dress shoes and shoes to the mall like that look normal, not like the barefoot shoes. And that's where I discovered like Vivos and all that, Merrell shoes. And they're a lot more comfortable and they're flat footed and my body feels a lot better with them.
Yeah, totally. No, I was on a walk the other day and one of my neighbors came up to me and he was wearing a pair of Hokas, which is like the absolute opposite, like the worst, so much cushion. And he pointed at my minimal sandals. He's like, how do you walk in those? I'm like, how do you walk in those, man?
It's such I never even heard of those. Hokas, huh?
Yeah, Hokas. They are, think of like, remember the Skechers that were so weird that like everybody was suing because they were like rounded thick on the bottom? Thick. They were like that. And he was complaining. He said he needed to wear them because he had hammer toes and knee pain. And it's like, dude, if you fix your feet, all that stuff will go away. Get into minimal, get barefoot, get outside. So much better. So much better.
Yeah. Do you think our ancestors were wearing like deep cushion shoes like that with the curves? They weren't, and probably some orthopedist or some conventional approach taught them that, right? You gotta, more support is better. And the reality is the more natural we can make it, the better. And natural means those toes need to be spread out, not closed in.
Yeah, that is. And it's amazing. You really can fix all of that. I was just talking to Tucker Goodrich about this. He's also done minimal footwear for almost 15 years. And I said, I mean, imagine if you had your hand in a glove all the time, how much, less function you'd have in your hand. And he said, a glove, forget a glove, try mitten. And think about that. Like keeping your hand in a mitten all the time, you'd be able to do nothing. And that's the way we treat our feet. It's crazy.
That's a great comparison. And that's awful. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I never want to miss an opportunity to talk about getting people in better footwear and getting the barefoot. But we also need to talk a little bit more about your story. You mentioned starting a CrossFit gym, but we talked about in the intro, you went through a pretty crazy health transformation. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you turned your life around?
Yeah, so I followed a standard American diet. As you and I both know, it's a very toxic, unhealthy way of living, and most Americans follow that approach, myself included. So here in Miami Beach, Florida, where I was born and raised, I still am right now, I follow that approach. And my parents, they were divorced. My mom raised me and my sister. She worked 3 jobs, and I was left to my own devices. And my mom also worked at 2 Kentucky Fried Chickens growing up. So you better believe she was bringing home leftovers every single night, pretty much, of Kentucky Fried Chicken. So I ate fried chicken all the time. I ate a lot of processed foods, and I developed an addiction to processed foods and sugar. I developed also other addictions to video games and also drugs. And I was a very bad kid, very unhealthy kid. I was always that kid growing up, bullied, picked on, obese, low self-confidence, low self-esteem, physically obese, but also mentally obese and mentally bankrupt, depressed, suicidal. And all of that transferred into my adulthood, where I found myself at the age of 24 back in 2008, being a 250-year-old adult who was physically obese and mentally obese, ready to give up on life, hurting emotionally, hurting physically, going through a bad breakup at that time. And I was rock bottom. I weighed 250 pounds, and I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I know a lot of people could relate to that. And the easy route was for me to end my life. And I wanted to actually end my life. And I kept exploring that several times. But thankfully, every time I explored that, I thought about my mom. I thought about, oh my gosh, like if I took my life, what would my mom have to deal with? The hurt, the devastation, the anger her, my family, my friends would have to deal with. And it stopped me because my mom was a superhero, and she still is a superhero to me to this day. And I didn't want to do that to her. So it forced me to get my act together. And that started with actually reading books. I started to read books from authors like Bob Proctor and Dr. Wayne Dyer and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and all these incredible authors who they all had their own pain to purpose story. And the books opened up a whole new world to me, a whole new dimension. And it did so much for me, the books did. But the number one thing the books did for me, it finally helped me take ownership and responsibility for the first time in my life. And that word, responsibility, is the most important word that we could truly understand and learn and apply. Responsibility is your ability to respond to life. Now, my ability to respond to life up until that point, Casey, was poor. I was the victim of my history. I was the victim of my slow metabolism, my bad genetics, my enabling family members. And when I took ownership and responsibility, all of that went away. I became the victor of my destiny and stopped being the victim of my history when I took ownership and responsibility. And that's when I started to change my environment, change my habits, eat better, move my body. And I went through this incredible transformation where I lost 80 pounds. I went from 250 pounds to 170 pounds. I went from 34% body fat, being categorized as physically obese, down to 6% body fat. I went from size 38 in my pants, my waist, to size 30. So finally, you could imagine, Casey, being the kid that was bullied, picked on. I had friends growing up with 6-pack abs, and it was just such a dream for me to ever achieve that, to get 6-pack abs. And I finally got 6-pack abs, right? But the most important thing that I achieved was not a physical 6-pack. It was a mental 6-pack. I started to understand, and even to this day, I continue to study how important your thoughts are towards healing your body. And that was 14 years ago, got me started in the health space. I was a personal trainer, CrossFit gym owner, and I was exploring different dietary approaches, et cetera. And I have been a student ever since.
That's incredible. What an amazing story. The responsibility thing, I love the way Mark Manson puts it, where it differentiates the difference between responsibility and fault. Like, it might not be your fault that your mom worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever, but it is your responsibility. And you can separate those two and say, like, okay, maybe I was the victim of this diet for so long, standard American diet, but now I can take responsibility. And separating those two things is just so important and so critical. I love that. How did you end up finding the low carbohydrate space, and specifically the ketogenic diet?
Yeah, and I love that breakdown of fault and responsibility too. So when I lost the weight, it wasn't through low carb keto. It was through excessive exercise, cutting calories, not the way that I would teach it to this day, but it worked because it was a big change to what I was doing, which was before I was sitting on my butt playing Call of Duty all the time. And then I exercise every day and just cut my calories. So I lost the weight, but here's the most important thing I want your audience to understand. I was fit, but I was a fit, sick person. I still had digestive issues. I still had brain fog. I still had acne, but I looked pretty fit with my 6-pack abs. So I wanted to explore what true health felt like at the cellular level. So I would, explore different diets. I was actually a vegan, a plant-based, 100% dogmatic vegan for a year and a half.
Nice.
And, it kind of wrecked my health doing that. And I decided to transition. This was back in 2013, 15 months into being a vegan. This is not working clearly. I did lab work verified the way I was feeling, which was awful. And then I decided to make a change. So what's going to be the next transition for me? What am I going to do? I thought the vegan diet was saving the world and saving your health. And both of that was a lie when I did the research. So that's when I discovered the ketogenic lifestyle and intermittent fasting. I started to study this process of ketone metabolism and how your body, your ancestors, all did ketosis. There's nothing new about keto. It's a metabolic process that's been around forever. And it was super fascinating to me. And then the intermittent fasting part was also fascinating to me, how our cells are not designed to eat every 2 to 3 hours. We're designed to feast, famine, AKA eating and then fasting. So I fell in love with this idea of keto and intermittent fasting. And I transitioned from a vegan to somebody doing keto and intermittent fasting. And for the first time in many, many years, I started to experience a burst in energy, vitality, hormonal health, and I felt really, really good. And I made a lot of mistakes, and I, still did a lot of guinea pig experiments on myself and my clients, and I discovered a lot of things along the way. So to answer your question, it was 2013 going into 2014 that I started to do keto, apply it, and also with intermittent fasting.
Very early, especially the combination of those two things, because I think a lot of people were maybe starting to hear about keto, but nobody was talking about fasting. That was back when fasting was still definitely going to kill you.
Yeah, it was taboo to talk about it. I remember posting on Facebook that, how I'm experiencing all these benefits from intermittent fasting. And if you want to learn more, this is my website. And I would get such hateful comments from friends that I thought, supported me. Like, oh my, I can't keep my mouth shut, Ben. You are promoting an eating disorder. How dare you? Like, all this hate about me sharing my benefits, the benefits I was getting from intermittent fasting. It's crazy. Now it's more accepted, but you still kind of get those comments here and there.
Totally. Well, it's amazing that those same people wouldn't say anything if you, eaten a box of donuts or something back in the day. Like, nobody cares if you're doing that. It's crazy. No, and it was interesting in my experience. I was working on a metabolic cart, and we were used to doing, resting metabolic assessments for people and telling them, like, okay, whatever this number is that your body is saying, you burn this many calories every single day. You need to eat at least this many calories, or you're going to crash your metabolism. And it just blew my mind that these people would come in, we'd measure them. Their metabolic rates were much higher. They were doing fasting. Clearly their body was just getting rid of fat, and they couldn't physically eat the number of calories we told them they had to eat to maintain their metabolism. It was the only way I was able to see that. It's nuts. So it's cool that you were able to adapt so early. For somebody who is thinking about keto, maybe they've heard what it is and they think, okay, keto must be a diet. It must be like this fatty kind of diet that I've heard of. I saw it on a magazine at the grocery store. When I heard about it, I thought back to my nutrition book and said, like, okay, I remember something about keto acidosis, and that was going to kill you. So this might be a bad thing. And then you have people that say, I am keto. And it's like, okay, well, I thought you were Mike, but I guess you're an identity, which is keto. So for the listener that might not understand, what is this keto thing?
I identify as keto. That's it. Yeah, to your point, there's a lot to unpack there, right? There's a lot of misinformation and confusion around keto, just in health in general. The problem we used to have, Casey, and I know you would agree, and many would agree to this. The problem we used to have maybe 30, 40 years ago, there's not enough information for us to get the right information to apply it and change our lives in any kind of field, right? Now you fast forward to 2022, we got Dr. Google, YouTube University, all these podcasts, some good, some really bad. And now the problem is too much information. And when somebody has an information overload and they're confused, they don't make a decision. They're paralyzed, they're confused, and I've been there myself. And it's really not the information that's going to change anybody's life or anybody's lives. It's the application of the right information. If information alone was power and had the ability to change your life, then every librarian would be a multimillionaire. But it's not the information. It's the right information applied at the right time. So going back to your question, what exactly is keto? A lot of people say, oh, you're doing that keto thing. What a fad. It's a dietary fad. It's a weight loss gimmick. And yeah, you could do it. You might lose some weight, but you're going to get a heart attack or whatever kind of negative connotation people attach to it. The reality is this: keto is not a diet. Keto is a metabolic process. And guess what? There's nothing new about it. It might be new to you or nuanced, but it's been around for as long as humans have existed. How do I know that? Am I just making that up? No. If you think about our ancestors, they did not have food readily available to them 24/7. You think they had Uber Eats or DoorDash or Whole Foods or your refrigerator? No, they ate whenever food was available. And guess what? Sometimes that would be several hours, several days, or sometimes several weeks. So what happened? They had to have an alternate way of getting energy, an alternate way of fueling the brain. And that process is called ketogenesis, a metabolic process, the birth of ketones. So when you're in a fasted state, when our ancestors were in a fasted state, they needed to tap into their body fat, which is stored energy, and start using that as an energy source. And the liver then produces ketones. And the benefit of beta hydroxybutyrate, which is one of the three ketones, the benefit of that one, it has the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and give your brain a fuel source when glucose is dropping low because you're not eating food. So when you think about that, it's a natural process. But in this day and age, most people, not just Americans, but most people are experiencing a keto deficiency. They're never getting into a state of ketosis. They're never allowing their body to tap into their fat stores. They're never getting into this amazing process. And we'll talk a little bit more about why this is important for inflammation and weight loss. But it's really a keto deficiency. And there was a study, and I shared this at the Keto Salt Lake. I think some other speakers shared it as well. A 2018 study that came out from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And they looked at over 8,000 American adults. And they wanted to assess what are their blood pressure markers, what is their HDL, LDL, triglycerides, A1C, glucose, and other metrics like medication or no medication. And they determined that 88% of American adults are unhealthy, metabolically inflexible. That is insane. That was before COVID.
That was before COVID.
Yep, before COVID. So you know what happened after COVID? That got worse. So I would say 90% plus of American adults are metabolically unhealthy. They really need keto. They need this metabolic process. The real fad diet, the gimmick diet that doesn't work, is the standard American diet. That's been around, 30 to 40 years, but keto has been around for as long as humans have existed. So that is what keto is. It's simply a metabolic process. And there's not one way to do keto. There's several. The way we teach it here at Keto Kamp is how do we reduce cellular inflammation with ketosis. So we view it from a cellular lens.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the idea of looking at it as ketosis, and also the opposite of that being something like glucosis, where, you're running the system in a completely different way, but nobody knows how we did it in the past. They're so used to this environment that we've been in, and average is not normal. And we look around and say, well, everybody else is eating this way, so I must have to eat this way as well. And you don't even understand that there's this whole other way of doing things that you're right, it's not a fad at all. It's the way we would have had to live to be able to survive to get to this point.
That is right. And you're right about, just because it's average doesn't mean it's normal. And when you go to events and conferences, or if you're hanging out with your friends, it makes it more difficult to kind of be the outlier, because everybody's going to eat heavy carbs. You're going to be snacking every 2 to 3 hours. And you're like, I'm fasted. Or do you have more protein and fat? Like, you're going to be looked at as the weird person. I was just in Las Vegas last week at an amazing video and business and marketing conference. And they gave us, breakfast and lunch and dinner. I gotta tell you, most people are eating the high carbohydrate pastries and meals, and I'm there like, I'm just gonna fast. I want to have more energy for the conference, right? And it's very uncommon to do that, and you're gonna get some looks and some comments. So you have to really stand your ground. And I really believe your competence equals your confidence, and that's where like listening to podcasts like this come into play, or being around a community. So we need to change the way we look at health, because we know that if we just follow the mainstream media and the government guidelines when it comes to promoting nutrition, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked for so many years. I mean, if it worked, we wouldn't have the current statistics from the cancer.org website saying 1 in 3 women are diagnosed with cancer within their lifetime, and for men, 1 in 2. We wouldn't have 60% of American adults being diabetic or pre-diabetic. We wouldn't have the prediction that in 2032, 10 years from now, 1 in 2 children are going to be born on the autism spectrum. And the new latest prediction that by 2030, 1 in 2 American adults will be obese, not just overweight, but obese. So if the nutrition advice worked, we wouldn't have disease on the rise. That's why conversations like this and your show, Casey, so important. Grassroots effect, we impact lives. So that's why we want to listen to episodes like this, share it, and spread the message out to the world.
That's right. As much as I would love to believe that we could have, a population-wide effect on people, at the end of the day, it really is about the individual and trying to reach the people who are sick of being sick the way that you were, and finding your podcast, which is absolutely amazing and such a great resource for people. So I love all of that content. And I love the way that you explained that. You had a few really funny lines in your speech at Keto Salt Lake, but my favorite was the one about the humans being smart enough. Can you repeat that one? That was good.
Yeah. And thanks, Casey. So, I was talking about the disease stats that I just shared with you. And it's like, okay, if you look at, for example, just go to your grocery store and look at the average product and read the ingredients. I mean, there's so many things you don't understand, so many ingredients you can't even read, things you can't pronounce. And that's become the norm, all these frankenfoods. So the quote is, human beings are the only species smart enough to create their own food and dumb enough to actually eat it. And that is a fact. So beware of the frankenfoods.
Classic. It's so hard to get away from, but again, with the right information, once people can weed out all the crappy information that's out there, they start to be led in the right direction. And you certainly did that with your book, Keto Flex. And I would love to deep dive into that content, especially when it comes to the 4 different pillars that you talk about. And maybe we can deep dive into each one of those things. And you can talk about like when somebody is in which pillar, what things they're going to be up against, what the priorities are, how people can get tripped up, and maybe we can go through that entire process.
Absolutely. Great question. I love that idea. So this is the book, Keto Flex, for those watching on YouTube. And the book, I'm really proud of the book. It's got some great endorsements. My mentor, Dr. Pompa, wrote the foreword. But, Thomas DeLauer endorsed it, Dr. Jason Fung, Dr. Ben Bickman, Dr. Mindy Pels, Abel James, who we were just talking about, and many big others in our space.
It's amazing.
Yeah, some big names. And, I'm honored to have those individuals endorse the book. So the book, I think it's an amazing book. Of course, I'm biased when I say that, but I have my 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars are adapt, fast, phase, and flex. So let's unpack all 4 and kind of give you an answer to the question you just asked on the 4 pillars. The first one is called adapt, meaning get fat adapted. What does that mean? When we gave that stat about 88% of Americans being unhealthy, they are what's called sugar burners. When I was obese, I was a sugar burner. It's not a fun way to live. How do you know you're a sugar burner? Easy little test for you to do tomorrow. Skip a meal and see how you feel. If you skip a meal, let's say I'm going to skip lunch tomorrow and see how my metabolism, my body adapts to that. And you do it tomorrow and you feel like crap, you're irritable, you're hangry, you're not fun to be around, you can't focus, your energy drops. Guess what? that's a big red flag. You're a sugar burner and we got work to do. Hey, I've been there myself for 24 years. So we want to get fat adapted. What does that mean? That means we want to get into ketosis. We want to start burning fat instead of sugar. Not only will that benefit you in terms of your day-to-day, so you don't have to eat every 2 to 3 hours, but it's also very anti-inflammatory to use ketones as an energy source. Here's why. Ketones they do a lot of great things, but one of those things, and I was sharing this with Keto Salt Lake, ketones have the ability to communicate with your cells and your mitochondria. For those who are unfamiliar with the mitochondria, simply put, the mitochondria are these energy factories that produce energy, and this energy is called ATP. There are other factors that come into play with the mitochondria, but let's keep it with the energy production part here. So ketones actually communicate to the mitochondria to make more of themselves, mitogenesis. And when the mitochondria make more of themselves, you produce more energy. When you produce more energy, you burn more fat because it raises your metabolic rate, but you also feel better. Chronic fatigue, a lot of symptoms out there are linked to mitochondrial dysfunction. So if you have the ability to create more robust mitochondria, this mitochondrial fitness through ketosis, that is freaking amazing. So the protocol is a 28-day approach in pillar 1, which is the adapt pillar, as we gradually decrease your carbohydrates to eventually get your total carbs below 50 grams. At the same time, we increase healthy protein and fat, eliminate the snacking in between meals. In about 14 days or so, sometimes 7 days, you're in ketosis. We leave you there for a full month, and boom, you've completed the first pillar. And then I can move on to the second one, but I want to know if you have any follow-up questions on that, Casey.
No, that's fantastic. I love the analogy that you gave of the sugar burning. And it's like, do you want to be good at burning sugar? And the answer is like, well, yes, kind of, when you need to be able to do it. Like, if I'm in your backyard and, watching Formula One for the first time in Miami, which is incredible, that was an amazing race. If you want to be good at that, you have to burn a very high amount of fuel, but you don't have that kind of fuel forever. So if I'm trying to drive to Miami, I want to have something that's really efficient. And then maybe I can switch cars and drive in Formula One, something that's really fast. You want both of those. But the problem is most people are only fueling themselves with sugar all the time. So that fuel is going up and down and up and down, and you get that effect. I think hangry is super, important one. Most people just assume that's totally normal, and it's not normal.
Yeah, no, you're so right. They think it's normal. And then they hear about intermittent fasting and there's no way I can do that. I go hypoglycemic. I can't function. That's because you're metabolically inflexible, which is exactly what Casey just described. We want metabolic flexibility. When you are metabolically inflexible and you go 3, 4, 5+ hours without food, all of a sudden you're starting to burn through your sugar reserves called your glycogen stores. Then also glucose in the brain gets low. And if you don't have the ability to tap into body fat and produce ketones, you're going to feel like crap. That is the real problem there. But when you start to get fat adapted and do this protocol, decreasing carbs, increasing fat and protein, it makes intermittent fasting that much more easier, and you feel great. You feel better when you skip a meal, not worse.
Yeah, I love that. Great explanation there. For somebody who's going through this adapt phase, what are some of the obstacles that most people, run up against when they're in this first month of changing their diet?
Great question. The biggest obstacle I've seen, there's two. I'll start with the first one. The first one is they don't have the proper bile flow to now break down the increased dietary fat. I'll unpack that real quick. The liver, which I call the soccer mom organ because the liver does everything for us like a soccer mom. The liver is responsible for so many functions in the human body. One of them is detoxification. Another one in regards to keto is to produce bile, B-I-L-E. And bile is needed to break down dietary fat and to detoxify as well. When somebody starts transitioning to ketosis and they're increasing their dietary fat, here's the problem. Their liver has been beat up for so many years through toxins, medications, processed foods, alcohol, and now they're increasing fat and they're forcing the liver to break down the fat with bile, but the liver is not functioning well. It's a sluggish liver, it's sluggish bile. So they increase fat, they can't break down the fat efficiently, and they don't feel that great. And they say, I did keto, didn't work for me. I actually felt worse. So supporting the liver makes a big difference. How do you support the liver? bitters for the liver. You want to increase your bitter-rich foods. And in my book, Keto Flex, I have an entire list, but these are going to be arugula, dandelion greens, dandelion tea, ginger root, apple cider vinegar, coffee, great news for coffee drinkers, artichokes, and rosemary, thyme, basil. You could season your food with that. Get your bitters up. And if you're really struggling, you might want to incorporate bile salts, ox bile, digestive bitters before your meals as well. That's the first challenge. So that's a really important thing to know, especially if you're a beginner going into this, get those bitters up right off the bat. Second challenge is people think just because it's keto friendly, it's health friendly, and those are not synonymous. For example, those PUFAs, polyunsaturated fats, these vegetable oils, AKA industrial seed oils, they are super rancid, very toxic to the human body, highly inflammatory, worse than sugar. But guess what? They're all keto friendly, and they're in a lot of keto products, unfortunately. So these are going to include, and I'm going to give credit to my friend, Dr. Kay Shanahan. She calls it the Hateful Eight. She's amazing. Here's the list for your audience to write down: canola oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil. Those are the 3 C's. Soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil. Those are the 3 S's. And then you have grapeseed oil and rice bran oil. We want to make sure we avoid those. They're highly inflammatory. And like I said, they create more inflammation than sugar. Instead, you want more saturated and monounsaturated fats. Avocado oil, olive oil, beef tallow, butter, ghee, duck fat. Those are much, much better. So those tips right there, you're supporting your liver with bitters and eating the right fats will put you in the right direction.
I love that. Yeah, that's tremendous. We are going to link to one of my favorite videos. It was a video you attempted to play at Keto Salt Lake, but there were technical difficulties, which is how it's made, which is a cool show because you get to see like how calculators and basketballs are made. And this was canola oil, and they were like proud of, this is our canola oil. It's so manufactured and goes through all these steps, and it is absolutely disgusting. It is so gross. You would think it's even gross to like using your car or something for oil, which is exactly what it is, and people eat it. It's crazy.
It's disgusting. Go watch it. For those listening and watching, go check out the notes below and watch it. It's a quick video. But here's something funny, Casey. I did like a screen record with my face on the screen and the canola video, how canola oil is made, like above me, and I posted it on TikTok last year. And a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. That's awful. I'm going to stop using it, which is great. But then there was several comments saying, nothing wrong with that process. What a brilliant process. I'm so happy with the American industry and how we're able to process these oils and get it to, mass manufacturing. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're missing the whole point. It's crazy.
Wow, that is crazy. I love that you pointed out too, the people, I always cringe when I hear this, the people that say, I tried keto, it didn't work for me. And it's like, well, what made you stop? And it was like, well, I felt awful. And I always want to tell them, like, it's almost as if you just took 3 legs of a flight to get to Bali. And you said, these flights blow, like all these smelly people, I'm standing in lines. This is stupid. I'm going to get back on the bus, go back to the airport and get out of here. And it's like, you were almost in Bali, and like, you could almost like stay there for the rest of your life if you like. You just had to get through that one phase. Got to get through that part. That's
a great analogy. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. And I would also recommend, stick and stay. It's always bound to pay. It's really the consistency. And when you change, anytime you change something, I have a formula for success that I always, adopt, and I teach it to my students. Anytime you change, it's going to challenge you, and it might suck. As a matter of fact, it probably will suck, right? When I started to lose my weight, as I shared my story about losing 80 pounds, I started to exercise. I was sore for days, sucked. Went to barbecues. People offered me chips and beer and burgers with the bun. I said, no, I have some goals to hit. And they made fun of me. Sucked. When you do keto and you start changing your pantry and getting comments from people, or you start to feel kind of off, suck. But here's the formula. I want everybody to adopt my formula for success. It is suck, 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 cess. Okay. Embrace the suck. Keep pushing forward. Like Casey said, you'll get to Bali. It's a beautiful place. You get to the great land of ketosis. It's a beautiful place. It might take you 7 days. It might take you 14 days, but stick with it. And it's such an amazing process for inflammation, for brain fog, for, of course, losing weight, but just overall general health.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the second phase. The second pillar in the book, which is fast. Tell us a little bit about how people are starting to incorporate that once they've gotten through the adapt phase.
Yeah, so once we are fat adapted and we're in ketosis, we're feeling good, then we practice fasting strategies, intermittent fasting strategies, and that's where fast comes into play. I like this protocol because, as we mentioned before, if you go into intermittent fasting as a sugar burner, it's going to be tough. But if you go into it as a fat burner, much more efficient. They pair hand to hand very, very, very well. So I just, share different fasting strategies: 16-8, which is 16 hours fasted, 8 hours eating; 18-6, so 18 hours fasted, 6 hours eating. And then we do a little bit of some OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. The cool thing about 1 meal a day, these 24-hour fast, there's some research from MIT that showed a 24-hour water fast strengthened intestinal stem cells in mice. So it's a great way to reset the gut, get more autophagy, which is the cellular repair and cleanup, and of course, more fat loss. So we experiment with different fasting strategies, and that is the second pillar.
Fantastic. And I love how you are able to be really pragmatic with people and not say that there's one certain way to do things. There's lots of different ways, and you can experiment. What works today might not even work next week. You have to be willing to look at that and test it on yourself to see what is best.
Yeah. And, adaptability is the name of the game. We never want to continue to do the same protocol. You want to mix things up. When you change and you force adaptation, that's where the body has to adapt, and good cells get stronger and bad cells don't adapt well. So we always want to mix things up.
Yeah, I think fasting is such a great proving ground to see whether you did the first pillar correctly, the adaptation. Because if you try to fast and it feels really difficult, you're really hungry, the feeling of blood sugar crashing, if you're still getting that, you probably need to go back to the adapt pillar and continue working on that. Because fasting, when you do it right, it's amazing. It's so effortless and easy, and it's just like Las Vegas. Like, you could have gone into the restaurant and hung out with everybody and sat down for like an hour, or you could have gone out and enjoyed yourself. And it's so nice to go out and enjoy life and not have it be centered around food all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I love the analogies, my friend.
Well, thanks. I've stolen all of these from everybody over the years, so none of them are mine. The third phase, the third pillar, phase. Tell us a little bit about that and how that then works into things.
Yeah, phase has evolved over the years. In the beginning, it was just very, very low carb, like starting off with 10 grams of carbs and then kind of going to 20, 30, 40. And then I changed it a couple of years ago, a little over 2 years ago, to phasing out all anti-nutrients, plant toxins, so AKA carnivore, the carnivore diet. And there's 4 different levels to carnivore. And I love carnivore diet. I think it's a great short-term protocol. I did some experiments on myself, transformed my lab work, transformed my health. I just felt incredible doing carnivore. And I started to apply it to some of my students. They felt incredible. It's a great way to reset the gut. Because if you think about vegetables and plants, a lot of people think, that's where all the vitamins and minerals are. Eat your greens, eat your broccoli, eat your kale, your spinach, etc. But you got to think about this. Over the last hundreds of thousands, millions of years, the name of the game is survival, right? When an animal needed to survive, like a bear or a wolf, animals have the ability to fight for themselves. They have legs, they have claws, they have teeth. They could fight off their predator. They were built with these mechanisms. Plants, how do they survive? They don't have feet. They don't have teeth. They don't have claws. How do they fend off predators? Well, they produced plant toxins. These are anti-nutrients that when a predator would eat them, then the predator will get sick and the predator won't eat them again. And these are called anti-nutrients. So there's over 100 of them. The most common ones are oxalates, phytates, lectins, and they're locked into plants. So when somebody tells you, kale has this amount of vitamin A and this amount of vitamin C and this amount of iron, that's not the real picture there, because they're locked by anti-nutrients. And a lot of people who eat a lot of these anti-nutrients and already have leaky gut, intestinal permeability, it makes things worse. Like oxalates could poke holes in your gut. So spinach is loaded with oxalates, kale loaded with oxalates. So that's why carnivore is so great. It's essentially an elimination diet. You're removing all of these foods that might be inflammatory, probably inflammatory to most people, these plant toxins, for a short period of time, 30 to 60 days. great way to heal the gut. You pair carnivore with intermittent fasting or different fasting schedules, great, amazing way to fix the gut. So that's what the third pillar is. You're phasing out all these anti-nutrients short term and then bringing them back in with the next phase.
This again is just another wonderful example of if you've only been born in this environment, you can't even understand. This will break your brain to even think about. But I heard this recently on a podcast, I believe it was Dr. Chafee, where it's like, go out in a natural landscape, anywhere you are, and go find the food. What is growing on a natural landscape that you can eat? Like, is there automatically like celery growing everywhere? Are there fruit available 365 days out of the year? Like, where are you going to get your food? That's not how this works. These are made. We created these basically by breeding all these fruits and vegetables together, and they just kind of hang out at our supermarkets 365 days a year, every corner of the globe. And nobody like considers like, wait a second, not really where did this apple come from? When did this apple come from? This wasn't picked by the Sprouts employee yesterday in the back of the store. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you're so right. I mean, it's amazing that we're able to do that, but it's also detrimental. It's just not the way that our cells are designed to function. That's why, there's people who eat seasonally. There's people who just like, they go from being carnivore to being vegan to being paleo, whatever it is. I like that approach. I like the change. Even with keto, I think keto is great, but I like changing it up and flexing out, which we'll talk about shortly. I think carnivore is great too, but I don't think carnivore is long-term as the solution. It's the rotation of these different approaches. And that's pretty much what our ancestors did, to your point. If blueberries were in season, guess what? We're eating blueberries for the next 2 months. If they weren't, we won't have them until next year. It's like their environment dictated what they would eat. Now you can get anything with the press of a button on their phone. Uber Eats, you have a millennial knocking on your door in 30 minutes with whatever you want. So that's the blessing and the curse.
Yeah, totally. No, it's just so different. When you're just not in that environment, you can't really imagine any other way. So I love how you explain that. Very clear. I think when people transition from keto to carnivore, that's when you get all the really weirdest results too. People will say like, well, my gut weirdly feels better, but now I'm getting more tan in the sun, or I used to get itchy in my arms all the time, and that just magically like went away. It's really interesting to see how people do that. I love how you make it approachable. It's just a short-term tool. You don't have to do this for the rest of your life. You might, and you could, but you definitely don't have to. So let's use that as a transition back into the fourth phase. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the fourth pillar is called Flex, Keto Flex, and that's the premise behind the book. I love keto. I think it's an amazing metabolic process, but it's also one tool. It's not the only tool. There's many, many tools out there. I don't want to be dogmatic about keto. I don't want to put myself in a box. I've done that before with the veganism. I also did it with keto in the beginning. So just like our ancestors all did keto, they also flexed out of ketosis when they had the opportunity, when they had access to honey or fruits or whatever carbohydrates was available that knocked them out of ketosis. They took advantage of that. There's not one culture in the history of this world that stuck with the same diet long-term. It's really a new problem we've created the last 50 years. So keto flexing is the approach of now you're fat adapted. You're keto adapted. Keto adaptation is different than fat adaptation. I'll explain the difference real quick. When you are first doing keto, let's say 14 days, 21 days, you've been in ketosis, you're now fat adapted. It takes about 14 to 21 days, sometimes 28 days to get fat adapted. And you can verify that by checking your blood ketones and, skipping a meal, see how you feel, et cetera. Keto adaptation is a little bit different. Keto adaptation typically takes on average 8 to 12 weeks. That's when your mitochondria now prefer ketones as an energy source, and they use it very, very efficiently. So the way that these 4 pillars are designed, the previous 3 pillars should take you about 8 to 12 weeks to complete. And at that point, you are now keto adapted. You are now metabolically flexible. And now the name of the game is metabolic freedom. And now we have the freedom to have a keto flex day. And what is a keto flex day? It's simply designating 1 day per week. And there's different ways to do it, but I'm going to just give you one example. 1 day per week where you intentionally eat more healthy carbohydrates. So if you've been doing 30 grams of carbs per day to stay in ketosis, on this day, you're going to have maybe 100 grams of healthy carbohydrates. Now, 100 grams is still low carb compared to a standard American diet, but it's enough to bump you out of ketosis. And we want to do that because when you do that, it actually helps some hormonal conversions like thyroid convert inactive thyroid T4 to T3. It could help with leptin. It could help with testosterone. It could help with so many different factors out there. So it also creates more metabolic flexibility. And like you said before, Casey, when you were explaining the person who's a sugar burner, they're metabolically inflexible, right? But when somebody is in ketosis for a very long time and they forgot the other pathway, which is burning glucose, that's another form of metabolic inflexibility in my eyes. So we want to be able to go back and forth, mostly burn fat, but be very efficient though at burning both sugar and fat. And that's what keto flexing is. And it's especially important for ladies who have a menstrual cycle. I have a whole chapter on keto and fasting for women. So that's what flexing is about. It's about flexing in and out of ketosis. I believe not only will it help with your health, it also makes this whole thing very sustainable long-term.
Yeah, that does make it really sustainable. You mentioned healthier carbohydrates to include when you're on that particular day. What are some of your favorites? And what are some that you still should probably continue avoiding?
Yeah, I would avoid gluten, avoid wheat. That's something I avoid all the time. Of course, the vegetable seed oils, that's not carbs, but you always want to avoid that. My favorite carbs are going to be fruit. That's a day for me to eat fruit. I like white rice, honey, berries, watermelon, cantaloupe. You know, if you've done the work, you've earned that. But let's say you have reached 8 to 12 weeks of doing keto, but there's still some work to do. You still have insulin resistance, you still have diabetes. Well, you still should stay in ketosis then. I mean, this is not medical advice, but somebody like you stays in ketosis a little bit longer as you work on your metabolism. And then eventually you can start flexing. Somebody like me, I've done the work, I'm metabolically flexible. I'll have the fruits, I'll have the white rice, I'll have the sweet potato, the yam, the yuca. I'll choose white rice over brown rice because there's no anti-nutrients in white rice. I'll pair that with protein to buffer the glucose response. So there's really cool ways to do this. In the book, I have an entire list of keto flex approved carbs, also healthy fats, healthy proteins, the worst ones out there. And I also have a list of how to test ketones and the optimal glucose and ketone ranges for ketones as well.
So many great resources. Can you time travel back in time, like maybe 15 years, and tell me the thing about the brown rice? I don't know how many pounds of brown rice I've consumed in my life trying to make it taste good, and it's just absolutely awful. Awful.
Dude, me too. When I went through my weight loss transformation, brown rice, chicken breast, it's like, no white rice. Brown rice has the fiber. It's so much better for you. I mean, we've all been duped, my friend.
Oh, gross. So gross. Yeah, I think of those carbohydrates that you listed, and I think those are all really safe and basically benign, especially things like fruit and white rice and honey. And if you're listening to this and you haven't gone through this process, you might think, well, I'm getting through all of this 8 to 12 months so I can go back to having some fruit. Like, that doesn't sound that exciting. But I can promise you, if you go through this process, your taste buds will completely change. When you mentioned cantaloupe, I was like, holy smokes, I can feel how like delicious but overly sweet that can be.
Yeah, exactly. When you change your taste buds, all that tastes sweet. It's like when people are not doing that, they're eating a whole bunch of sugar and processed carbs, they become numb essentially to sugar. And you know, once you have readjusted your metabolism and changed your palate, to your point, things like blueberries taste super sweet. But here's another thing, you know, so a lot of people are going to have I don't like cheat days. I don't like the idea of a cheat day. I call them feast days, intentional flex days. But the truth is this, people are going to have their cheat meals. They're going to have that wedding. They're going to have that cruise. They're going to have that party, and they're going to indulge. Now, if you would dedicate strategically that day to be your keto flex day, and then you just go right back on track the next day, that would mitigate a lot less damage. So you could use it for one of those days. You could say, okay, I've done the work. I've been doing keto for 8 to 12 weeks. I got my friend's wedding on Saturday. That's my keto flex day. I might not eat the best foods. I'm going to probably have some alcohol and some cake, but it's my flex day. And the next day I go right back on course, right? So if you're going to have a cheat day, a keto flex day would be the ideal day to do it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really effective way to do it. And it's effective because also that person might realize that cake tastes disgusting compared to what they thought it tastes like before. And yeah, you mentioned this changing taste buds. I love focusing on nutrition as far as a lifestyle practice, because I feel like it's, for most people, it's the one lever that if you pull, you get things going in the right direction. They're more likely to pull other levers in their lives. I know it's not the same for everybody. Some people, sleep is their main thing, and then that helps. Or some people it's exercise and that helps. But inevitably, you start changing your nutrition, you want to change other lifestyle things. So I'm just curious, in your opinion, what are some of the other lifestyle things that you like to include when you're recommending, this type of a lifestyle to somebody, as far as bringing into their life to feel better?
Yeah, for sure. You're right. One discipline transfers to another discipline. That's why I love intermittent fasting, because it really helps. The discipline you develop from intermittent fasting, that mental fortitude, I've seen it for myself and many of my students transfer to other disciplines. Sleep for sure is a lever you want to prioritize. That's why I wrote in the book Keto Flex, there's actually an entire chapter on sleep, even though it's a keto book, because I thought it was that important. But to answer your question, what's the one thing that I think, it's like mandatory? It's the fundamentals of health. I spoke about it at the Keto Salt Lake, conference. It's going to be the strongest vitamin in the world. And I'm going to share what that vitamin is. This vitamin is called vitamin G. It's the most potent vitamin you could ever find. As a matter of fact, Dr. Joe Dispenza has administered vitamin G to people who have gone through his conferences, and he's done brain scans on them as they take the vitamin G. And he noticed 1,200 chemical reactions that took place instantaneously when they took vitamin G that put their body in a healing anti-inflammatory state. So your audience is thinking, where can I buy vitamin G? Do I got to go to Whole Foods, Vitamin Shop, Amazon? Well, vitamin G is gratitude, vitamin gratitude. Developing a gratitude practice has changed my life, and it will change your life. And I know it sounds easy and woo-woo, but I got to tell you, the more consistent you are with writing down what you're grateful for, experiencing gratitude, it puts your body in an anti-inflammatory healing state. And you could plug that into paleo, you could plug that into keto, carnivore, vegan. Gratitude is imperative, and it's a universal law. What you feed energy to expands. So let's say you're not practicing gratitude. You're thinking about all the things in your life that is not working for you. You're complaining, you're gossiping, you're watching the news. You're going to get more of the things you don't want to work for you. Universal law. When you focus on gratitude, guess what? What you appreciate appreciates. You get more things to be grateful for. So if you're focusing on the negative, you get more negative. You're focusing on the positive, you get more positive. And there's science to back that up. It's not woo-woo anymore. So I would say really develop a gratitude practice, get really good on, the thoughts that you're thinking, become aware of those thoughts and choose loving, abundant, grateful thoughts. Because the truth is this, you're the most influential person you will speak to today. And if you have 60,000 thoughts per day with yourself, you want to choose loving, abundant, grateful thoughts. And that's going to make everything upgrade and improve in your life instantaneously.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Maybe you could tell us, what is something you are especially grateful for today?
Yeah, I'm grateful for many, many things. It's a Monday and it's a holiday, and you and I are so committed to the cause that we're recording a podcast. And I'm grateful to get this podcast out to your audience, your podcast, your YouTube followers. And, I'm grateful that my message is going to resonate with your audience and make a difference for them. And maybe they're going to share this, and that share will be turned into 5 shares and 10 shares. So I'm grateful for this technology to be able to do that. I'm in my home in Miami Beach here, and your home in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we're able to reach so many people all across the world. It's super cool. So I'm grateful for that. Grateful for my beautiful dog who's taking a nap right here next to me, and his unconditional love. So those are just a few things I'm grateful for. What about you, Casey?
I love that. I'll say my dogs as well. They tend to make it onto more podcasts. They're a lot louder than your dog is. But yeah, I would say my dogs, and I would say, today I had the opportunity, which I have every single day, to go up and watch the sunrise come over the mountains, which you saw here is just absolutely stunning. Wow. And just the birds in the neighborhood, the birds singing, and, the ducks doing their thing, and just to be part of life and to feel it living all around you is really an incredible feeling. So I'm going to go with that.
Beautiful. I love abundance is our birthright, my friend.
Love that. I absolutely love that. This has been such an amazing conversation. And like I said before, you are every bit the person that you put yourself out to be. You're absolutely positive and your energy is so infectious. There's so many different ways you work with people as well. So I'm wondering if you could let the listener know where they can find you, where they can find your work, and what kinds of programs they can expect when they find you.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. I appreciate the kind words. And I think you're awesome as well. You've been a great friend and supporter. So thank you so much. My book would be great. It's available paperback, Kindle, Audible as well. I narrated myself. It took me about 12 months to get that damn Audible out.
Love that.
So ketoflexbook.com, you can find all the different formats there. In terms of like wanting to work with me, my signature program and course is called the Keto Kamp Academy, where I give you a step-by-step structure on the 4 pillars, along with group coaching, and we have health coaches we're hiring to also get involved with this. And it's just an amazing program. We've had incredible transformations on there. It's a monthly program. So you can learn more about that over at ketokampacademy.com. Camp is spelled with the K. And you can find everything over on my website, which is benazadi.com. We have our Keto Kamp podcast, Keto Kamp YouTube channel, and all of our social media, which we're putting out content every single day. I'd love to connect with you. And I'm very accessible. So I'd love to hear your messages and comments and all that. And yeah, it'd be great to connect with your audience.
That's fantastic. We will link to all of that in the show notes. For the listener, Ben also offers every single week, I believe on Wednesdays, a Q&A session, which is absolutely incredible. I've crashed it a few times just to listen in and hear you and hear the questions. And you are rapid fire answering these questions. I was thinking about like asking a question like, how does a Tesla engine work? See if I could like throw you off your game, but I don't think I'd be able to. You do a really great job.
That would throw me off. I probably wouldn't answer that one. I'd probably skip it. I don't know the answer. Yeah.
Tesla engine works like this and this and this.
You're every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. You're right. I'm live on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook personal, Facebook business, Twitter, and TikTok all at once. And in the last 2.5 years, we've only missed 3 Wednesdays in the last 2. So I'll be live again this week and every other week. So yeah, thank you for that reminder.
That's amazing. Yeah, we will definitely link to that in the show notes as well. Ben Azadi, thank you so very much for all that you've done, your life story and everything that you've been able to accomplish and to be able to share that message. And I have no doubt that this will reach 1 billion people. So thank you so very much for everything you do. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We really appreciate it.
Casey, you're doing a great job. Great interview, great podcast host. And thanks for having me, brother.
Thank you so much. High praise coming from you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.